Today's video is going to be a good one, guys. We're going to talk about ways that you can feed your animals right from your home, your backyard, your farm, your homestead without feed. So when we talk about the grain shortages and we talk about the animals really being frowned upon by the government, what ways and means can we feed our animals? When the crap hits the fan, when there's a collapse in the crazy world and we can't afford the feeds, there's a shortage of the feeds, and we have got to take care of ourselves and, more importantly, our animals to take care of ourselves. We're going to talk about sustainable practices today to feed your animals when there is no feed. Starts right now. Well, you can see I am sweating. It is hot here in the south, sitting amongst tons of feed. This is just part of the feed. We have another major order coming in sometime this next week. So we have probably 8,000 to 10,000 pounds in this room, and that's not counting any more we've got coming. I am sitting by a lot of old bee boxes, and to be honest with you, I got some flying around me. I'm hoping you are gonna enjoy these suggestions. These are just points. I'll tell you how we view raising our animals and making sure that we're taking care of them even when we don't have feed. We love having feed. We buy it in bulk. So first and foremost, to save money, you need to buy in bulk. You need to buy your feed in bulk. You need to find someone who is very reputable. You need to make sure that you're buying straight from the distributor or from the manufacturer of the feed, or find a place that you can depend on. Buy from that one place and build a relationship with that feed store, because you may be one of the first ones called. If you're a big bulk orderer, sometimes you can get it quicker than somebody that's ordering one bag, because they're needing to make money and they're needing to sell feed. So you need to develop those relationships with the feed companies, with the co-ops, with the stores that you're buying from. Don't just buy from a random big box store. Nothing against Tractor Supply or Rural King, any of those, but really, when it comes to feed, making sure you're buying good quality feed from a local provider or someone that you can know and trust, first and foremost. So now let's talk about if we get to the point where we cannot get the feed we're needing. I'm going to start off with the ruminant animals, because they're the easiest, and then we're going to talk about the chickens, the pigs, and rabbits, and so many other items that we can talk about dealing with feeding animals. So first and foremost, when it comes to our cows and sheep, that's the easy button for raising animals. Raising cattle and sheep as grass-fed animals is huge. Don't practice feedlot mentality. Don't let them just eat every day just because you want to. We do feed our dairy cows some alfalfa when we're milking. We do like to feed some alfalfa or some grain, all organic, all non-GMO, but we like to do it when we're moving the sheep or when we're moving the cows. That's just like a treat to say, hey, follow us, then you get something for it. However, that's not a have to. Do it because we want to build a relationship with our cows, with our sheep. But if it gets really down to it, it's not a necessity to have. So long as you are using your cattle and your sheep in a very rotative, regenerative, rotational grazing style method, they can pretty much eat without you doing anything other than leading them maybe with a bucket, shaking it, maybe just a scoop full of feed just to get them enticed to come that way. You can put rocks in a bucket. As long as they hear that sound, they're going to come follow you. But rotational grazing is where it's at. If you're raising animals without moving them, especially sheep and cattle, first and foremost, I bet money you're treating them with a dewormer or buying deworming blocks, or your animals are sick or not what they need to be. If you're rotating though, you're not having a treat. Having feed is one thing, but having to medicate your animals is another. Do not do that to your animals. When you rotate your animals, you are building those fields up to be better every time, because ultimately they're eating the grass, they're dropping the grass back out their back end, and that manure is being spread to ultimately provide them for next rotation. You allow them just to graze everywhere, they're going to eat the ice cream grass, they're going to eat the bottom line grass, they're going to let that mature grass go. With rotational grazing, you intensively make them eat those areas, and through that, they become foraging cows. They learn to eat everything. Same way with your sheep. Learn to do rotation. We use Gallagher fencing. We use Premier One netting. We use simple strands of Patriot wire. Any of those companies provide very good things. We use solar generators, so we're not needing electricity. So when we talk about not getting feed, there's probably a lot of other crap going on in the world. So you need to make sure you're protecting your animals, and the solar fencing, the energizers are another way to do that. So now we've talked about cows and sheep, how we're rotating on the grounds. We're using mobile netting. We're using mobile pull smart fences from Gallagher. We're using rod and reel Gallagher fencing and poly wire. All those methods are what is going to take care of our animals and push them to the next spot. As they're getting pushed to the next spot, they're getting fresh grass. Now, if you have too many cows, this is not going to work. If you are rotating and you realize they're running too fast, they're not able to let the grounds rest, you need to downsize your herd. The one thing you need to learn when it comes to methods, when it comes to feed for your animals, is you can't have too many animals. You need to decrease your herd and make sure you're doing all that you can to provide for the ones that you're needing. That's going to be the necessity. If you have a family milk cow, of course, major necessity. If you're raising a steer for meat, major necessity. If you're raising mama cows for some babies to have for regenerative measures for food, great. However, if you're just raising replacement heifers, or you're just raising animals because you like them, that's not the kind of world we're living in. So you need to make sure that you are only raising what you need in necessity. If you need to deplete your herd a little bit, you either need to process cull or sell to another farm or barter that animal off for whatever you can get for them. They do not need any grain. Don't buy the lie that they need grain. Don't buy the lie that they have to have dewormers and all these medications to keep them safe. Build a hardy animal, build a herd animal, build a foraging animal. We even let our cows go in the woods. We have what we call the pine paddock. It's a forest paddock. The sheep love it, of course, but even the cows do, because they learn to forage on what is under there growing. Now, another point to your fields: do not fertilize your fields. If you fertilize your fields are going to get used to it. If we don't have feed, we don't have medicines for your animals, you sure as heck not going to have fertilizers for your fields as well. Plus, the price of fertilizer right now is crazy and expensive. So that's something you need to get rid of too. Rotational grazing makes your fields better, because ultimately you're allowing those cows and those sheep to drop their manure across. If you're rotating them together, that's fine. Remember, parasites for cows and sheep cannot cross, so they cannot take each other's parasites. They can help clean up the grounds around the manure of each other's parasites. So there's some good hits to making your grounds better. Now, when people say, oh, well, what about all the weeds? You know, if I'm not using herbicides, what am I doing? Well, you're building a cow that will eat a lot of those things that sometimes you thought that they wouldn't eat. We have a lot of herbal, natural medicines and natural herbs and flowers that we forage in our pastures. Our cows and sheep eat them, and it heals their bodies too. A cow and sheep know what they need and what they don't need. What they don't need, they stomp down, and it also just goes back in the ground. That's just biomass. What they are eating and what they're leaving to pass through, it may be knocking seeds off bahia tops, because again, we're doing rotational grazing. So whatever they're not eating, they're stomping down. They're making a good bedding for the next seasonal growth, or the next time they rotate, you're going to see some more seeds, some more grass come up. But what we're doing by rotational grazing, again, is we're making them not just have free choice, we're allowing them to eat this certain area. Now, we're rotating heavy, so we may rotate every other day or every third day, depending on the size of the paddock. But the point is, they can live without fertilized grass, without feed, and definitely without chemicals and dewormers and medicine that we're so accustomed to give our animals. Now, lastly, when it comes to ruminant animals, hay, winter feeding. If you don't have a way that you can grow things like Kentucky fescue that will grow naturally as a perennial grass, or you can't find an annual grass to plant, such as this ryegrass seed over here, that's okay. And you have to look towards hay. Hay is needing to be done, and if you're buying hay from a provider and you don't know where that grass is cut, you don't know if you can depend on that person to cut it, you need to, again, decrease your herd, so therefore you can leave some standing hay that you and some friends and a scythe and several friends with scythes can go through there and cut the hay the old-fashioned way. If you don't have the ground to do that, you need to decrease your herd. Another option, we live close to a field, and we contract that field out for hay in that church field that's kind of at the west side of our property. And some of you have seen that in their videos. Our hay is not fertilized. It literally connects to our field, so our animals are used to foraging the grass that we have, and that's the same native grass that we're cutting hay off. We've had a great relationship with them for years, and will continue. Now, say for instance, he says, hey, you can't, we don't have the means, we don't have the diesel or the gas or the automation to be able to cut your hay, then I guess I'm rotating my cows over that as a standing hay, or I'm literally cutting it by hand. Don't say you can't do it, because a survival plan, you may have to cut the hay by hand. But leave enough place where you can provide a hay field, even on your property. Barter your beef, or barter your milk or your butter with a friend who may have another field. If he can't grow the cows, you grow the cows and he grows the hay. Now let's talk about really another two animals that are the small animals they're not easy like the ruminant, because the ruminant you just move around. With these animals, you do have to feed them a little bit more. So let's talk about the rabbits and chickens. Now, you can let rabbits run around on the ground. They can eat what they want. Unlike chickens, rabbits are just not going to come home to roost. They're not going to find a quote-unquote home here. So if you're raising your rabbits in what they call rabbit cages, or you're having them in a colony, then you need to make sure that you are growing parts of your garden for your rabbits. Now, our rabbits are completely grass-fed and completely vegetable-fed, meaning they are eating strictly off our ground. Now, we give them alfalfa right now because we can. However, they can live off the same hay, they can live off the same shrubbery and what we consider our byproducts of our vegetables like crazy. We grow lettuce pretty much 12 months out of the year. Some of it bolts. Again, we're harvesting our own seed. By seed saving, we are providing seeds, again, to feed us, to build the lettuces and the greens and all those vegetables that we always talk about. But ultimately, you're planting enough to make sure you have an abundance for preservation for us, but also for your rabbits. Rabbits are pretty easy. They don't eat a lot, and you can maintain them along with water and good quality vegetables or grass that you can give more quality hay. Now I'm sitting on the chicken feed. We have about 2,000 more pounds of chicken feed coming literally in about a week. Chickens, again, are pretty easy. We raise 3 forms of chickens. One is in the hen house. That's our egg producers, and we bed them. They get some scrap vegetables and some scrap grain. They get everything we need to build an egg production. They're not foraging a lot, but we still give them a ton of scraps, a ton of grass, a ton of hay, and a ton of our byproducts, our vegetables, just like we were talking about with our rabbits, because we don't want them to ever get used to one appetite or one food or one feed. So the main thing is we are feeding them primarily grain because we want the egg production. For the other 2 sets of chickens, they're in the fields. They're working behind the cows and the sheep that we talked about earlier in those rotational grazing mobile chicken coops. You've seen those in other videos. I challenge you to check those videos out if you have not seen those. They're phenomenal. I'm not affiliated with the company, but they are the bomb. We also do the Joel Salatin kind of chicken tractors, and then we also have the Justin Rhodes style we've built with the chickshaws. So there's so many different ways you can do that. You can use the same nets, the same solar panels that we talked about with the ruminant animals. However, say now we're to a point where we can't even keep the ones in the hen house because we do not have enough, scrap vegetables, because all these other animals are eating the vegetables. So therefore, you're starting to have these chickens foraged like the rest of them. They're moving behind the cows because in cows are dropping their manure. Within 2 to 3 days, flies are on the manure. Now this may sound nasty, but flies go in the manure, lay the larvae. We allow the chickens to come behind the cows. The chickens go through the cow manure and they spread the manure, so they're fertilizing the field and they're being fed strictly out of the manure with the larvae and with the flies. Now that's not the majority part of their diet, but that's a big part of their diet. They're getting protein just like we would in balancing our diet. Now if they're foraging every day, every single day, our ducks and our chickens move. They're moving in those permaculture mobiles. They're moving on fresh grass, so they're getting fresh crickets. They're getting fresh bugs. They're getting fresh other insects. They're getting fresh grass. They're getting all those things to help build them to make them a foraging creature. Now, 2 things with that. The 2 negatives. Does that mean you're going to have this full-breasted chicken if it's a Cornish cross or if it's a heritage bird? Or are you going to have this gorgeous, thick chicken when you go to actually cull it or process it to eat in your home? No. Does that mean you're going to produce eggs like you were when you were feeding grain? No. Those two things will be depleted a little bit. But in a survival situation, you're still going to get eggs. You're still going to have broody hens raising new chicks. You're still going to have chickens to be able to process and eat. It's just going to diminish maybe the thickness and the bigness of the bird. It's going to diminish the egg counts. That's not going to diminish the quality of any of that because they're eating naturally off the earth with no fake synthetic ground covering, no fake herbicides or pesticides or chemicals to fertilize. It's natural ground. So they're getting good quality forage because remember, the same herbs that we're picking and we're foraging for our health, they're eating. So you're getting a very quality egg and a very quality chicken, but it may not be to the size or to the amount of egg production that you had. Don't worry about that. The main thing is you want to get these chickens to a transitional point to where they're foraging for their food. You're keeping them alive. They're healthy. You're healthy. And you have a food source out there that's providing you eggs or chickens. Not only are they doing that, they're spreading your manure, so they are becoming the tractors behind the cows to smooth out the ground, to spread the manure, to eat the waste of the flies, and to make sure your pastures are growing for the next time your ruminant animals come in. This is a lot of nerdy math when it comes to raising animals, but it's very important, and you need to make sure you're doing this very, very, very consciously and for a purpose. So if I want to rotate the chickens, I want to make sure they're behind the cows. I don't want them eating the ground and dropping their manure where the cows are eating. I want the cows and sheep first, then the chickens. Same with the ducks, and again, so forth that we've talked about in this prior segment. Anytime we get an animal on farm, we are going to make them hardy because of the way we approach the animal in a regenerative ag kind of way. Lastly, we're going to discuss this big pile of feed here. Probably the most challenging way of raising animals, and the most challenging animal is your hog. We raise our hog in forest. We have a forest raised pork. We want to make sure those animals are always in the forest. We're rotating them in the forest. Right now, a lot of them are having babies, so we're not rotating them as much. We're giving them the whole sections, and you've seen that in other videos. However, we've rotated them. They become the tillers for the garden. You need a new garden spot? Use the same nets. Train your pigs to it, and I promise you, they will make garden spots. We have old videos. They're terrible quality, as in the view of the camera. We're shaky, but the information is concrete. What we still do, if we need a new garden and we don't have a tractor, don't kill yourself. Let your pigs come in there. They're going to till it up, root it up. Then you can move them right back out. So learn to use your animal as dual purpose. So therefore, they're working for your farm. And if you don't have the feed and the grain to feed them, so guess what? You rotate them too. We rotated pigs for years. On pasture and even in our yard. Then we moved them in the forest. The forest has been the best move because, again, it allows them to have things to eat. They like snakes. They like grubs. They like bigger rodents that they can get a hold to. Pigs can live off just about anything. I challenge you, don't go lay down in a pig forest because you may be their food later on as well. Pigs can eat anything. So what we do is anything and everything that is what we consider scraps, old food, old vegetables, old broken down garden areas that we've got the biomass. Say we have a ton of corn husk. Say we have a ton of greens and peas that are left. After we get a harvest done, you've got all this greenery growing. We give it to our animals. You have to learn to make them be dependent on not just grain. So if we're giving our pigs grain daily, we may every once in a while slip in just milk from our family milk cow. Or we may put in milk with some old lettuce or some old tomato or some old lemongrass or some herbs or some oregano or some lettuce or some corn husk or some pea shells. We give all that to the pigs. They root around, they eat what they want, and ultimately, again, you guessed it, they're foraging. They are eating things like the wild blackberries, the wild strawberries that's growing in the woods. There's little green trees that grow up. They love eating them. There's all kind of varieties. They know what they can and can't eat. People say all the time, well, you can't put them in there because what if they eat something that they can't and all of a sudden it poisons them? I have raised animals and I've never had an animal poisoned based on what they're choosing to eat. If we give them a place to eat and it's good quality ground that animals have seen before and you kind of know what's in those grounds, I've never had an animal get sick off of what they're eating, especially if it's a natural part of the ground and a part of the forest. So if we're feeding right now, we may be feeding 30% off the forest and 70% of feed. You'd be surprised when we talk about these gardens. We grow tons of gardens, and saving seed is important for your animals. If you're growing microgreens and sprouts for your chickens, or if you're growing fodder for your chickens, all those things are good things. We're growing tons of sweet potatoes. Sweet potato leaves you can eat. We can eat the sweet potatoes. We can give the sweet potatoes to the animals. The greens are phenomenal, and every animal loves all that. If you are having a sustainable seed source, then you have a sustainable food source, not only for you, but for your animals. So now let's talk about the pigs once more. As we talked about the chickens not giving us the egg production, or being big breasted gorgeous chickens like you'd find at Walmart. Talking about the cows, you may have to diminish your herd to get a quality herd to stay where you can have a hay field. Same with the pigs. You may not be raising pork belly for bacon or these big huge hams. You may be looking for more of a pulled pork or sausage pig, because you're not going to grow this monster fat pig, but you're still growing the pig. The pig can make it in forest. Don't think that a pig has to have grain. Is grain good for a pig and a chicken? Well, it is, and we buy the highest quality grains that we possibly can find. But again, when the crap hits the fan, you are the way that they can make it. You are the lifeblood for them. You put them over pasture. You put them in areas you need new gardens, because remember, this is a regenerative style gardening practice now. You need more gardens because you have got to grow food for them. So now it works out in your favor. You're needing garden spots because you need to grow them food now. So therefore you put the pigs in a net in the area, they till it up. We have videos on that. I promise you it works. They till the ground up. You turn around, you plant it in greens, or you plant it in corn, or you plant it in sunflowers, you plant it in peanuts, you plant it in peas. You now have got a source of food for any and every animal on farm. Please do your research. Find a hardier animal to raise. But if you start practicing foraging now, if you start practicing another food source while you still have the grain to buy, keep buying the grain, but start supplementing other things. You know the way that we heal a lot of our animals? We don't deworm. They hardly ever get sick. In the amount of years, I can count less than on my hand how many animals I've had to be sick. But it's because they're eating oregano, they're eating rosemary, they're eating lavender and lemongrass. They're getting pieces of good food and organic raised vegetables like we are in our diet. They're getting old fruit that may not be enticing to us, but it may be what they need. During Halloween, when we grow tons of pumpkins, they get pumpkins and pumpkin seeds, which is a natural dewormer. They're getting quality throughout their life. So when the grain stops, it's not like you cut it off and they've got to go on some diet. It's just like you. If you don't balance out your diet and you're not eating just a hamburger every day, if you're eating cereal, a hamburger, and some other fast food meal every day, and all of a sudden something goes down and you can't have any of that and you've got to go to a broccoli and rice diet or a ramen diet, it's going to really affect you. Same way with your animals. If you're giving them a forage already, you're giving them supplemental feeding by putting them on pasture, putting them on pasture, putting them in different areas of woods, different areas of ground. For instance, over here, we grow tons of clover. So those become our clover fields. So we'll move animals over just on the clovers. This area is growing still wild because this was a pine thicket before we made it fields. So this area is not growing just bahia. It grows a lot of other herbs and a lot of other things that are native to forest because it's still a young pasture. These over here are growing phenomenal Bermuda and bahia grass, and then turn around growing fescue in the winter because of the prep we've done to it. The rotation of animals makes for great quality grounds. Those grounds are healthier because of that. So you're planting gardens in healthier ground. You're not using synthetic fertilizer, so your ground is not used to that kind of fake synthetic chemicals that it's used to getting. It's used to what it's getting. It's not changing. It's not costing you any more. You're just rotating animals. A little bit more work to make sure your animals are safe. Now that's just a few ways that you can take care of your animals. It's very common sense. I didn't tell you anything that you probably didn't already know, but I want to encourage you to start allowing your animals to supplement feed with foraging, putting your pigs in the forest or on pasture, or making new grounds for gardens, Make sure they get a lot of their old things. Look into fodder systems, look into microgreens, look into growing vegetable gardens simply for your animals. Because if you're saving your seeds and you're being a sustainable gardener, then ultimately you're providing feed, not only for you, seeds for your next year, but also feed for your animals. Guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have different ideas, leave them down below, because right now it's a serious issue. Grains are in shortage, wheat is in shortage. The inflation, the price of food is going up. If we didn't have this feed though, you know what? It would be hard, but we could do it. The animals would be fine, and we would still be sustainable and trying to do all we can to take care of our family and even our neighbors. God bless. Happy homesteading.